I wasn't expecting anything special that morning, just the usual coffee, a quiet moment, scrolling through my inbox, and then I saw it, an email from her. The subject line was simple. "Hi, Stanley." That was all it took. My stomach twisted. My hands actually shook. I hadn't heard from Nalini in over a year, not since she vanished along with the money, the promises, and the life we were building. And now, suddenly, she was back in my inbox like nothing ever happened. I didn't know if I should open it or delete it, but I clicked. What I felt reading those words, it's hard to explain. It was like ripping the tape off a wound I'd tried to forget was even there. The same charm, the same sweet tone. And yet, this time, it felt cold, mechanical, like I wasn't a person, just a memory she thought she could tap again. I should have known when she said, "I've never had anyone treat me this nice." I thought I was helping her start a better life. Turns out, I was just funding a dream that didn't include me. Love made me blind. And debt heavy, painful debt, made me finally wake up. To anyone watching this, if you've ever been in love, if you've ever wanted to believe someone saw you for who you really are, I hope this story speaks to you. Please like, comment, and subscribe if any part of this hits home. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It means more than you know, truly. And to those of you who've been watching these stories, video after video, super thank you. I see the same names coming back, and it keeps me going. You've given me a place to tell the truth, the kind that's hard to say out loud. This isn't easy to share, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Let me take you back to where it all started. The boat rocked gently as we headed toward the limestone cliffs of Krabi. Nalini leaned against my shoulder, her black hair catching the late afternoon sun. "Stanley," she whispered, "you make me feel so safe. I never had anyone treat me this nice before." I wrapped my arm around her, breathing in the salt air and her jasmine perfume. This was it. This was what I'd been missing all those years back in Florida. "You deserve to feel safe," I told her, and I meant every word. She looked up at me with those dark eyes, and I felt like I was 25 again instead of 58. The long-tail boat captain smiled at us, probably thinking we were just another tourist couple. But this felt different. This felt real. 3 months earlier, I was eating microwave dinners in my empty house in Tampa. My divorce had been final for 2 years, but I was still living like a ghost. Wake up at 5, drive to the construction site, bark orders at 20-somethings who thought they knew everything about framing, come home to an empty refrigerator and cable TV. That was my life. That was what I called living. "I need a vacation," I'd told my foreman buddy Mike. "Somewhere far. Somewhere I can forget about all this crap for a while." He'd suggested Thailand. "Cheap, beautiful, and the people are friendly," he said. "Just don't fall in love with the first girl you meet." We both laughed. At 58, with a gut and gray hair, I figured love was off the table anyway. But Bangkok hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. The smells, the sounds, the chaos that somehow made perfect sense. And then there was Nalini. I'd hired her for a private city tour through my hotel. She showed up in a simple white dress, speaking better English than half the guys on my crew back home. "Where would you like to go first, Mr. Stanley?" she asked, and the way she said my name made me stand a little straighter. We spent 8 hours together that first day. She took me to temples I couldn't pronounce, street food stalls where old women smiled and piled noodles high on plastic plates. She laughed at my terrible attempts at Thai phrases and didn't seem to mind when I stumbled over curbs or got confused by the traffic. "You're different from other tourists," she said as we sat by the Chao Phraya River that evening. "Most people, they just want to take pictures and leave. You ask questions. You listen." I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been locked up tight since my marriage fell apart. "Maybe I'm just old enough to know what matters," I said, and she smiled. Not the practiced smile she probably gave every tourist, but something softer, something real. Now on this boat in Krabi, I squeezed her hand and felt her squeeze back. The water was so blue it looked fake, like something from a postcard. But her warmth against my side was real. Her laugh when I pointed out a fish jumping was real. I extended my stay, I told her as the boat headed back toward shore. Another 2 weeks. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You want to stay longer? She asked, and I nodded. Hell, I wanted to stay forever. Back in Florida, nobody would miss me except maybe the IRS. Here, with her, I felt like I mattered again. I want to see more of this place, I said, with you if you'll have me. She pressed her face against my chest, and I felt her tears soak through my shirt. I would like that very much, she whispered. Very, very much. As the boat pulled into the harbor, I watched her profile against the setting sun. Her skin was golden, perfect. She was 22 to my 58, but age felt like just a number when she looked at me like I was the only man in the world. When was the last time anyone had looked at me that way? When had anyone ever looked at me that way? Tomorrow we go to Wat Pho, she said, planning our next day with the excitement of a kid planning Christmas. I show you the giant Buddha. Then we eat some tam at my favorite place. You will love it. I already loved it. I loved all of it. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way she grabbed my arm when she got excited about showing me something new. The way she made me feel like I wasn't just surviving anymore, but actually living. Sounds perfect, I said, and pulled her closer as the boat bumped against the dock. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 2 weeks turned into a month. I moved out of the hotel and into a small serviced apartment in Sukhumvit. Just temporary, I told myself, but I was already looking at longer-term rentals online. Nalini helped me navigate the Bangkok metro, taught me which street vendors had the best pad thai, showed me rooftop bars where the city spread out below us like a circuit board made of gold and neon. You're different here, she said one evening as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, sharing a bottle of Singa beer. The traffic noise from Sukhumvit Road was a constant hum, but somehow it felt peaceful. In America, I think you are a very serious man, very stressed. Here, you smile more. She was right. I caught myself humming in the shower, striking up conversations with other expats at the coffee shops, actually enjoying the chaos of the weekend markets. When was the last time I'd hummed? When was the last time anything had felt worth humming about? My ex-wife used to say I never smiled. I told her, surprised at how easily the words came out. I'd spent 2 years avoiding any mention of my marriage, but with Nalini, it felt safe to remember. She said I was like a robot. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. She didn't see the real you, Nalini said, reaching over to touch my arm. Maybe she didn't want to. Her fingers were warm against my skin, and I felt that crack in my chest widen a little more. My marriage to Susan had been 23 years of slowly growing apart. She wanted things I couldn't give. A bigger house, fancier vacations, a husband who wore suits instead of work boots. I worked 60-hour weeks trying to make her happy, but it was never enough. By the end, we were like roommates who happened to share a bank account and a mortgage. I'm sorry she hurt you, Nalini said softly. Some people, they don't know how to love properly. They only know how to take. I looked at her in the dim light from the apartment, this beautiful young woman who seemed to see something in me that nobody else ever had. What about you? I asked. How do you know how to love properly? She smiled and moved closer on the small balcony chair we were sharing. My grandmother taught me. She said love is like taking care of a garden. You have to pay attention every day. Water when it's dry, give sunshine when it's dark, protect from storms. She paused, looking out at the city lights. My grandmother loved my grandfather for 52 years. Even when he got sick and forgot her name, she still brought him flowers every day. Something about the way she said it, the reverence in her voice, made me believe her. This wasn't some bar girl spinning stories for tips. This was a woman who understood something about love that I'd never learned in all my 58 years. I'd like to meet your family sometime, I said, and immediately worried I was moving too fast, but she smiled and leaned her head against my shoulder. "Maybe soon," she said. "They would like you, I think. You have kind eyes. My grandmother, she always says you can tell a good man by his eyes." We started spending every day together. She'd pick me up in the morning on her little Honda motorbike, and we'd explore different parts of the city. Chinatown with its narrow alleys and gold shops, the weekend market at Chattachak where she'd bargain for everything in rapid-fire Thai while I stood there grinning like an idiot. The floating market in Damnu and Saduak, where vendors sold fruit from boats that looked like they'd been floating there for centuries. "You know what I love about you?" she said one afternoon as we shared mango sticky rice from a street cart. "You're not afraid to try new things. Most Farangs, they want everything to be like home. You want everything to be different." She was right again. I was tired of everything being like home. I was tired of knowing exactly what every day would bring, tired of the same conversations with the same people about the same problems. Here, every day was an adventure. Every meal was a surprise. Every conversation with Nalini revealed something new about the world, or about myself. "I'm thinking about staying longer," I told her one evening as we walked through Lumpini Park. "Maybe a lot longer." She stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes wide. "You mean it? You would stay in Thailand?" "I mean it," I said, and realized I'd never meant anything more in my life. There's nothing for me back in Florida. No family, no real friends, just a job that's grinding me down and a house that feels like a tomb. She threw her arms around me right there in the middle of the park, not caring who was watching. "Stanley, this makes me so happy. So happy." Her voice was muffled against my chest, but I could hear the tears in it. "What about your tour guide work?" I asked. "If I stay, I don't want to mess up your business." She pulled back and looked at me with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "Stanley, you are my business now. You are everything to me." The way she said it, with such fierce certainty, made me feel like I could conquer the world. That night, we made love in my little apartment while the city hummed and pulsed outside our window. It wasn't just sex, it was connection, something I'd been starving for without even knowing it. Afterward, she traced patterns on my chest with her fingertip and whispered, "I love you, Stanley. I love you so much it scares me." "I love you too," I whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of my being. "I love you too, Nalini." 3 months in, she started talking about tomorrow, in a way that included both of us. "When we have our own place," she'd say, or "after we get settled." It felt natural, inevitable. I was already thinking the same things. "Stanley," she said one morning as we sat in our favorite coffee shop near Siam Square, "can I ask you something serious?" My heart jumped a little. In my experience, nothing good ever followed that phrase. "Of course, ask me anything." She stirred her iced coffee slowly, not meeting my eyes. "Do you think we could ever have something together? I mean, a business? Something that belongs to both of us?" The question caught me off guard, but not in a bad way. "What kind of business?" "Tourism," she said, finally looking up at me. "I have so many ideas. Private tours, but better than what most companies do. More personal, more real. Show people the Thailand that tourists never see." Her eyes lit up as she talked, her hands moving expressively. "I know this country, Stanley. I know the hidden places, the real people. And you understand what foreigners want. Together, we could build something beautiful." I felt a surge of pride that she saw me as a partner, not just a customer or a temporary boyfriend. "Tell me more." "My uncle, he has boats, long-tail boats for river tours. He's getting old, wants to sell the business, but boats are expensive, and the licenses." She shrugged. "Thai bureaucracy is very complicated. Takes money, takes connections, takes time." "How much money are we talking about?" She named a figure that made me blink. $15,000. It was a lot, but not impossibly so. I had savings, investments from the years of grinding work in Florida. Money I'd been hoarding like a dragon. not knowing what I was saving it for. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was what I'd been working toward all my life, without knowing it. I don't want you to think I'm using you, she said quickly, misreading my silence. This is just an idea. We don't have to. No, I interrupted. I like it. I like the idea of building something together. I reached across the table and took her hands. But I need to understand the details. The legal stuff. The paperwork. How it would all work. Her smile could have powered the whole city. Really? You would consider it? I would more than consider it. I think it sounds like exactly what we both need. We spent the rest of the morning talking about it. She sketched out routes on napkins, told me about waterfalls and temples that most tourists never saw, described village families who could cook authentic meals for small groups. Her enthusiasm was infectious. I could see it all clearly. Us running day trips and overnight tours, building a reputation for showing people the real Thailand, creating something meaningful together. I need to meet your uncle, I said. See the boats, understand the business side of things. Of course. I will arrange it. He will like you, I think. He respects men who work with their hands. She squeezed my fingers. Stanley, this could be our future. Our real future. Together. That afternoon, she took me to meet Uncle Boone near the docks along the Chao Phraya River. He was a weathered man in his 60s with hands like leather and a smile missing several teeth. We sat on plastic chairs outside a riverside noodle shop while he explained the business in broken English mixed with Thai that Nalini translated. He says the boats are in good condition, she told me. He has 3 longtails and all the proper licenses for river tours. But the new regulations are complicated. Lots of paperwork, lots of fees. He doesn't have energy for it anymore. Uncle Boone nodded vigorously and launched into another stream of Thai. Nalini listened, asked a few questions, then turned back to me. He says if we can handle the license transfers and the new permits, he will sell us the boats for a good price, 12,000 instead of 15. But we need to move fast because other people are interested. I looked out at the river, watching the long-tail boats cutting through the brown water, their drivers navigating the chaos of river traffic with casual expertise. I could picture myself learning to handle one of those boats, taking couples and families on tours through the klongs, showing them the Bangkok that existed beyond the shopping malls and tourist traps. What do you need from me to get started? I asked. Nalini and Uncle Boone exchanged a rapid conversation in Thai. He says we need $5,000 for the license applications and initial fees, she said. Then another $7,000 when everything is approved. $5,000. It was a lot of money to hand over to someone I'd known for 3 months, but looking at Nalini's eager face, at Uncle Boone's weathered hands gesturing toward his boats, it felt right. It felt like an investment in something real. I can do that, I said. I'll need to make some transfers from my U.S. accounts, but I can do that. Nalini's eyes filled with tears. Stanley, are you sure? This is a big step. I'm sure, I said, and I was. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I was investing in a future that excited me instead of just trying to survive the present. That evening, we celebrated at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the river. Nalini ordered champagne, and we toasted our partnership. To our future, she said, raising her glass. To our future, I repeated. And as we clinked glasses, I felt like I was finally living the life I was supposed to live. I wired the $5,000 to Nalini's Thai bank account on a Tuesday morning. She promised to have the initial license applications filed by Friday, with copies sent to my email by the weekend. Friday came and went. Then the weekend. Then another week. The government offices are very slow, she explained when I asked about the paperwork. Uncle Boone says this is normal. Sometimes takes 1 month, sometimes 3 months. Thailand bureaucracy is not like America. I understood bureaucracy. I'd dealt with building permits and city inspectors for 25 years. But I'd also learned that legitimate businesses always provided receipts, always kept copies, always had some kind of paper trail. When I asked Nalini for copies of the applications we'd filed, she smiled and said, "Soon, soon. My uncle is handling all the official parts. I just want to see what we submitted," I said. "Make sure everything's correct, you know." "Of course, darling. I will get copies from Uncle Boone tomorrow." Tomorrow became next week, which became next month. Every time I brought it up, she had a reason why the papers weren't ready yet. The office was closed for a Buddhist holiday. Uncle Boone was visiting his sick mother in Eisen. The government was reviewing all tourism licenses because of new regulations. I started to feel a familiar knot in my stomach, the same one I'd carried through the last years of my marriage when Susan's explanations for her spending never quite added up. But I pushed the feeling down. This was different. This was Thailand, not Florida. Things moved at a different pace here. I needed to be patient. Then I decided to fly back to Florida for 2 weeks to handle some business. Sell my truck, close some accounts, officially retire from the construction company. When I come back, we'll really be partners, I told Nalini. No more ties to America. She seemed excited about the plan, helped me pack, drove me to the airport. "I will miss you so much," she said, kissing me goodbye at the departure gate. "But when you come back, everything will be ready. Our business, our future, everything." The 2 weeks in Florida felt like a dream or maybe a nightmare. My house seemed smaller, shabbier. My neighbors looked older, grayer. The guys at the construction site clapped me on the back and wished me luck, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. 58-year-old men who fell for young Thai women were a cliché, and we all knew it. "Just be careful out there, Stanley," my foreman Mike said as I cleaned out my office. "I've heard stories about guys who never came back." "Not like that," I told him. "This is real. We're starting a business together." He nodded, but his expression said he'd heard that before too. I tried calling Nalini every day, but the connection was spotty. Sometimes she answered, sometimes she didn't. When we did talk, she sounded distant, distracted. "Very busy with the paperwork," she'd say. "Uncle Boone needs me to translate everything." "Can you send me some photos of the forms?" I asked, "just so I can see how things are progressing?" "My phone camera is broken," she said. "I will get new phones soon." The knot in my stomach grew tighter. I cut my Florida trip short by 3 days and booked an earlier flight back to Bangkok. I wanted to surprise her, see the progress on our licenses, maybe take Uncle Boone out for dinner to celebrate. But when I knocked on her apartment door on that Thursday evening, a man answered. Young Thai wearing boxer shorts and nothing else. He looked as surprised to see me as I was to see him. "Nalini?" I called over his shoulder. She appeared behind him, wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. Her face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, guilt, anger, then something that looked almost like relief. "Stanley," she said. "You're early. You said Saturday." "I missed you," I said, staring at the man who was now reaching for a t-shirt from a chair near the door. "I wanted to surprise you." The man said something in Thai to Nalini. She responded sharply, and he grabbed his clothes and pushed past me into the hallway, not meeting my eyes. "Who was that?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just a friend," she said. "He was helping me with some translations for the business papers." But she wouldn't look at me directly, and her hands were shaking as she tightened the belt on her robe. I stood there in her doorway, feeling like the world's biggest fool. The knot in my stomach had turned into a full-scale collapse, like a building falling in on itself. Just a friend who answers your door in his underwear? "Stanley, please don't be angry. It's not what you think." But it was exactly what I thought. And the worst part was, I'd known it somewhere deep down for weeks. All those unreturned calls, all those missing documents, all those excuses that never quite made sense. I'd known, but I'd chosen not to know, because knowing would have meant admitting that I was just another lonely old fool who'd fallen for the oldest trick in the book. "I'm going back to my apartment," I said, backing away from her door. "Don't follow me. Don't call me. I need to think." "Stanley, wait," she called. But I was already walking toward the elevator, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my balcony watching Bangkok wake up, drinking instant coffee and trying to make sense of what I'd seen. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself that maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe the guy really was just a friend. Maybe I'd misread the whole situation because I was tired from the flight, stressed from the trip to Florida. My phone rang at 8 in the morning. Nalane. "Stanley, please let me explain," she said before I could even say hello. Her voice was thick with tears. "I'm so sorry you saw that. I'm so sorry." "Explain what exactly?" "Niran is my friend from university. He was helping me translate the business documents because some parts are very technical Thai that I don't understand. He stayed late because we were working on the applications for your business licenses." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing them all night. "In his underwear? He spilled food on his shirt. I gave him something to wear while I washed it." "Stanley, please, you have to believe me. Nothing happened. Nothing would ever happen. I love you. Only you." I wanted to believe her. God, how badly I wanted to believe her. "Then where are the documents? You've been promising to show me paperwork for weeks." "They're almost ready. Niran was helping me make sure all the English translations are correct so you can understand everything. I wanted it to be perfect before I showed you." "I don't need perfect. I just need to see what we're doing with my money." There was a long pause. "Can I come over, please? I need to see you, to hold you. I need you to look in my eyes and see that I'm telling the truth." Against every instinct I had, against every lesson I'd learned from my divorce, against every warning my friends back home had given me, I said yes. She arrived an hour later, carrying a folder full of papers and wearing a simple blue dress that made her look younger than her 22 years. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands trembling as she spread documents across my kitchen table. "See," she said, pointing to forms covered in Thai script with English translations stapled to each page. "Business license application, tourism operator permit, boat registration transfers." Everything we talked about. I couldn't read the Thai, and the English translations were rough, but they looked official enough. Government stamps, official letterheads, reference numbers. "Why didn't you show me these before?" "Because they're not final yet. Uncle Boone said we shouldn't celebrate until everything is approved. He's very superstitious about these things." She touched my arm gently. "Stanley, I know you're upset about Niran. I know how it looked, but I swear to you, on my grandmother's grave, nothing happened. He's like a brother to me." "A brother who hangs around your apartment in his underwear?" "It was innocent, completely innocent. I understand why you're angry, but please don't let this ruin what we have. Please don't let this destroy our future." She started crying again. Not the manipulative tears I'd learned to recognize from my ex-wife, but something that seemed deeper, more genuine. She looked so small sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by official papers and broken dreams. "I need more than promises," I said. "I need to see real progress. I need to meet with Uncle Boone directly, see the boats, verify that this business actually exists." "Of course, tomorrow if you want. I'll arrange everything." She reached across the table and took my hands. "Stanley, I know I've hurt your trust. I know I've made mistakes. But what we have is real. This business is real. Our future together is real." I looked into her eyes, searching for lies, for deception, for the cold calculation I'd seen in Susan's face during our worst fights. But all I saw was a young woman who seemed as scared as I was, as desperate to make this work as I was. "Okay," I said finally. "Tomorrow we see Uncle Boone. We go over everything. And from now on, no more secrets, no more delays. If we're really partners, then I need to be treated like a partner." "Yes," she said, squeezing my hands. "Yes, absolutely. No more secrets." She came around the table and hugged me, her face pressed against my chest. "I love you, Stanley. I love you so much. I would never do anything to hurt you." I held her close, breathing in her jasmine perfume, trying to ignore the voice in my head that whispered I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But she felt so warm, so real in my arms. And the alternative, admitting that everything we'd built together was a lie, seemed impossible to face. "I love you too," I whispered into her hair. "I love you too." That night, we made love with a desperate intensity that felt like we were trying to prove something to each other or maybe to ourselves. Afterward, she fell asleep curled against my side, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why I still felt like I was falling. 3 days later, she called me crying. "Stanley, I need help, big help. Uncle Boone says there's a problem with the final licensing fee. The government changed the requirements. We need $7,000 more, and we need it today, or we lose everything." $7,000? You said the total cost was $12,000. I know. But the new regulations are different. Uncle Boone is at the government office right now. He says if we don't pay today, they'll give our license numbers to someone else. Every rational part of my brain screamed scam, but her tears sounded so real over the phone, and I'd already invested so much. What was $7,000 more if it meant saving the $12,000 I'd already spent? "Please, Stanley. I know it's a lot. I know you've already given so much, but this is our last chance, our only chance." I wired the money that afternoon, $7,000, everything I had left in my accessible accounts. As I filled out the transfer forms at the bank, my hands were shaking so badly the clerk asked if I was feeling all right. "Just nervous about a big investment," I told her. "Good luck," she said, and something in her expression made me think I was going to need it. For 3 days after the final transfer, everything seemed perfect. Nalini was attentive, loving, excited about our future. She talked about boat routes we'd run, customers we'd meet, the life we'd build together on the river. She even took me shopping for captain shirts and boat shoes, laughing as I tried them on. "You look like a real river captain," she said, adjusting my collar in the store mirror. "Very handsome, very professional. Our customers will trust you immediately." But on the 4th day, her phone went straight to voicemail. I figured it was dead, or she was busy with final preparations. On the 5th day, same thing. By the 6th day, I was standing outside her apartment building, pressing her buzzer and getting no response. "Excuse me," I said to the security guard in the lobby. "I'm looking for Nalini Siraporn, apartment 412. The guard looked at me with something that might have been pity. "You friend of Miss Nalini?" "Yes, her boyfriend. I've been here many times." He nodded slowly. "Miss Nalini moved out 2 days ago, very early morning. Moving truck, many boxes." The world tilted sideways. "Move out? Where did she go?" "Don't know, she no say. Pay deposit, take key, finish." He shrugged. "Many girls here, they come and go, very fast." I stood in that lobby for 10 minutes, trying to process what I'd heard. Then I got a taxi to the river docks where we'd met Uncle Boone. The noodle shop was still there, but when I asked about Uncle Boone, the owner just stared at me blankly. "No Uncle Boone here," she said in broken English. "Never Uncle Boone." I described him. Older man, weathered hands, missing teeth, owns long-tail boats. She shook her head and called over 2 other vendors. They had a rapid conversation in Thai. Then all 3 of them looked at me with expressions I was starting to recognize. Pity mixed with embarrassment, like they'd seen this before. "Maybe you think different place?" the owner suggested gently. "Many docks on river. Many old men with boats." But I knew I was in the right place. I recognized the plastic chairs, the view of the water, the smell of the kitchen. This was where we'd sat and planned our future. This was where I'd agreed to invest my life savings in a business that apparently didn't exist. I spent the next 2 days trying to find any trace of Nalini or Uncle Boone. I went to government offices and tried to find records of tourism license applications in my name. The clerks were polite but clear. No such applications existed. I went to banks and tried to trace where my money had gone. Privacy laws prevented them from giving me details, but one sympathetic manager suggested I file a police report. "This happens sometimes with foreign investors," he said quietly. especially older men who fall in love. Very sad, but very common. The police were professional but not encouraging. They took my statement, photocopied my bank records, promised to investigate, but the detective assigned to my case, a tired-looking man named Sergeant Prasha, was brutally honest about my chances. "Your money is gone," he said in excellent English. "The girl is gone. Even if we find her, proving fraud is very difficult. She will say you gave her money as gifts, as support for your relationship. No crime in accepting gifts from boyfriend. But the business, the licenses, the uncle with the boats, all lies. Very sophisticated lies, but lies." He leaned back in his chair and studied me with eyes that had seen too much. "How long you know this woman?" 4 months. 4 months? And you give her $12,000? When he said it like that, it sounded insane. It was insane. I loved her. "Yes," he said, not unkindly. "Love makes very smart men do very stupid things. You are not the first, Mr. Stanley. You will not be the last." That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the bank statements that showed my accounts had been drained to almost nothing. $12,000 gone. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the growing realization that everything I'd felt, everything I'd believed about Nalini and our relationship, had been carefully constructed to separate me from my money. How much of it had been real? The way she looked at me, the way she laughed at my jokes, the way she'd curl up against me at night. Had any of it been genuine, or was I just a mark from the very first day? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stanley, I'm sorry. I had to leave Bangkok. Family emergency. I will contact you soon. Love, N." I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. There would be no more contact. There would be no family emergency story that made this all make sense. There would just be me, sitting alone in a Bangkok apartment, trying to figure out how I'd become such a fool. I was 68 years old, nearly broke, and further from home than I'd ever been in my life. And for the first time since I'd arrived in Thailand, I felt exactly like what I was, a tired, lonely old man who'd paid a fortune to believe in a lie. I couldn't afford the Bangkok apartment anymore, so I moved north to Chiang Mai, where the rent was cheaper, and I could pretend I was starting over instead of just hiding. My new place was a studio in a building full of other Western men who'd washed up in Thailand for various reasons. Most of them were younger than me, backpackers and English teachers living on tight budgets. But a few were my age or older, and their stories had familiar themes. Joe lived 2 doors down, a 63-year-old Australian who'd come to Thailand 5 years earlier to retire on his pension. He'd lost most of his savings to a woman in Pattaya who'd convinced him to invest in a bar. "At least you got 4 months of happiness?" he said when I told him my story over cheap beer at the corner shop. "Mine only lasted 6 weeks before she cleaned me out." "How do you live with it?" I asked. "The shame, I mean. The knowing that everyone back home was right about us being idiots." Joe shrugged and took a long pull from his Chang beer. "You learn to live with a lot of things when you don't have any other choice. Besides, who says they were right? Maybe we're just the unlucky ones. Maybe somewhere out there's an old bastard like us who found real love and is living happily ever after." But I didn't believe him, and I could tell he didn't believe it either. We were both just trying to make ourselves feel better about being the kind of men who showed up in cautionary tales that other men told each other. I'd brought 1 suitcase to Chiang Mai and $4,300 in remaining savings. The studio cost me $250 a month, leaving me less than $1,000 to live on. I bought rice and vegetables from the market, learned to cook simple Thai dishes on a single burner, started walking everywhere because I couldn't afford taxis or tuk-tuks. The silence was the hardest part. For 4 months I'd talked to Nalini every day. We'd plan tomorrow and next week and next year together. Now my phone never rang. Nobody texted. I could go 3 or 4 days without speaking to another human being, except to order food or pay rent. I tried calling my ex-wife once, just to hear a familiar voice. Susan answered on the third ring. Stanley? My God, I haven't heard from you in 2 years. Are you all right? I'm fine, I lied. Just calling to say hello, see how you're doing. I'm doing well. Remarried last year, actually. David's a good man, very stable. There was something in her voice, a contentment I'd never heard when we were together. Are you still in Thailand? Yeah, still here. And that girl you mentioned? Naomi? Nalane. And no, that didn't work out. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Stanley. I really am. I know you were excited about her. The kindness in her voice almost broke me. This woman who'd spent the last 5 years of our marriage telling me I was emotionally unavailable and impossible to love was showing me more compassion than I'd shown myself in weeks. Susan, can I ask you something? Of course. When we were married, was I really that bad? As a husband, I mean? Another pause, longer this time. You weren't bad, Stanley. You just weren't there. Not really. You worked all the time, and when you were home, you were thinking about work. I felt like I was married to a ghost. I was trying to provide for us. I thought that's what you wanted. I wanted you, the real you. But I don't think you knew who that was. Her voice softened. Maybe this time in Thailand will help you figure it out. After we hung up, I sat on my narrow bed and tried to remember who I'd been before the divorce, before the loneliness, before Nalini. But all I could see was an endless succession of job sites and empty evenings, a man going through the motions of living without ever really being alive. Maybe that's why Nalini's attention had felt so intoxicating. For the first time in years, maybe decades, someone had seen me. Or at least someone had pretended to see me well enough that I'd believed it was real. I started taking long walks through Chiang Mai's old city, past temples and markets and coffee shops where young travelers planned their next adventures. Sometimes I'd sit in the same cafe for hours, nursing a single cup of coffee and watching people live their lives. Couples holding hands, friends laughing over shared meals, families taking photos in front of ancient pagodas. I wasn't jealous exactly. I was more like an anthropologist studying a species I'd never quite learned to join. I'd spent so many years focused on surviving that I'd forgotten how to actually live, and by the time I'd figured out what I was missing, I was too old and too broke and too ashamed to start over. One evening, I found myself at Wat Chedi Luang, the temple with the ancient pagoda that had been partially destroyed by an earthquake centuries ago. I sat on a bench watching the sun set behind the ruins, thinking about all the things that time had damaged beyond repair. A young monk walked by and nodded at me politely. He looked maybe 25, with the kind of peaceful expression that suggested he'd found something I'd been searching for my whole life without knowing it. "Excuse me," I called out, surprising myself. "Do you speak English?" He smiled and walked over. "A little. You have question? I guess I'm wondering how you find peace after you've made terrible mistakes, how you forgive yourself for being stupid." He considered this seriously, sitting down on the bench beside me. Buddha teach that suffering come from attachment. We want things to be different than they are. We want past to be different, future to be different. But past is already gone, future not yet here. Only now is real. But how do you let go of the past when it keeps replaying in your head? You don't fight the thoughts. You watch them like clouds in sky. They come, they go. You are not your thoughts. You are the sky. I wanted to argue with him, to explain that some mistakes were too big to just watch float by like clouds. But he had such a calm certainty that I found myself nodding instead. "Thank you," I said. "Welcome," he replied, and walked on toward the temple. That night, for the first time since leaving Bangkok, I slept without dreaming about Nalini. I've been in Chiang Mai for 8 months now. My savings are down to $1,800, and I've started teaching English conversation at a language school for 300 baht an hour. It's not much, but it's enough to keep me fed and housed while I figure out what comes next. The other teachers are mostly young backpackers working their way around Southeast Asia, but they've accepted me as a curiosity rather than treating me like a cautionary tale. "You're like the wise old sensei," one of them joked, Except instead of martial arts, you teach us about the dangers of falling in love. But I'm not wise. If I were wise, I would have seen through Nalini's act from the beginning. If I were wise, I wouldn't have wired $12,000 to a woman I'd known for 4 months. If I were wise, I wouldn't be living in a studio apartment in northern Thailand teaching English to teenagers for beer money. What I am is awake. For the first time in my adult life, I see myself clearly, without the filters of pride or self-deception or desperate hope. And what I see isn't pretty, but it's honest. I was a lonely man who confused attention with love, who mistook being needed for being valued. Nalini didn't seduce me with her beauty or her youth. She seduced me with her willingness to see me as someone worth loving, and I was so starved for that feeling that I paid whatever she asked for it. The truth is, I used her as much as she used me. I used her to feel young again, relevant again, attractive again. I used her to escape a life that had become unbearable in its emptiness. The difference is, she was honest about what she wanted. I was the one who convinced myself it was love. Last week, I sat down and wrote her a letter I'll never send. Not because I'm afraid or angry, but because there's nothing left to say between us. She gave me exactly what I paid for. 4 months of feeling like I mattered to someone. The business was never real, but the service was. I just refused to acknowledge what kind of transaction we were really conducting. Dear Nalini, I wrote, I'm not angry anymore. I understand why you did what you did, and I understand why I let you do it. We were both playing roles we thought the other person wanted. You played the loving girlfriend who saw something special in an old American man. I played the generous provider who could rescue a young Thai woman from whatever life she was trying to escape. The problem wasn't that you lied to me. The problem was that I lied to myself. I knew, somewhere deep down, that women like you don't fall in love with men like me unless there's something else involved. But I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored every warning sign, every inconsistency, every moment when your mask slipped just a little. You taught me something important, though you probably didn't mean to. You taught me that I'd rather be alone and honest than connected to someone through lies and desperation. You taught me that buying love isn't the same as earning it, and that pretending to be loved is worse than admitting you're not. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. I hope you found whatever you were looking for, or at least enough money to buy yourself some time to keep looking. I hope the next man you meet treats you with more respect than I did, even if he's just another Mark. As for me, I'm learning to be alone without being lonely. I'm learning that there's a difference between solitude and isolation, between being single and being incomplete. I'm 68 years old, living on the other side of the world from everything I used to call home, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. Thank you for that lesson. It was expensive, but it might have been worth it. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer with all the other things I'm keeping but not using. Tomorrow I'll teach my morning classes, eat lunch at the noodle cart near the school, spend the afternoon reading in the park by the river. It's not the life I planned when I came to Thailand, but it's honest. It's mine. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd met someone real, someone who actually loved me instead of my bank account. But that's just another fantasy, another way of avoiding the truth. The truth is that I wasn't ready for real love then. I was too desperate, too needy, too willing to accept counterfeit emotion as long as it made me feel better about myself. Maybe someday I'll be ready for something genuine. Maybe I'll learn to offer something more valuable than money, something more attractive than my willingness to pay for affection. Maybe I'll become the kind of man who deserves to be loved for who he is instead of what he can provide. But that's a tomorrow problem. Today, I'm sitting on my balcony watching the sun come up over Chiang Mai, drinking coffee I made with my own hands, getting ready for another day of being exactly who I am. No pretenses, no performances, no desperate attempts to buy my way into someone else's heart. My name is Stanley. I'm 68 years old. I have $47 in my wallet and a story that makes other men shake their heads in recognition or relief. I came to Thailand looking for love and found expensive lessons instead. It wasn't what I planned, but maybe it was what I needed. The sun is fully up now, and the city is waking up around me. Time to start another day of being nobody but myself. It's not the happiest ending, but it's the most honest one I've got.